Thursday morning time once again for This Week in Fish and Wildlife. We're on the road this morning with Carol Endicott. Carol, we're at Rock Creek, just not far from its confluence with the Yellowstone River. Let's talk about the work that you've been doing for Yellowstone cutthroat trout right out here behind us.
Okay, well this stream here is one of our projects has been ongoing. People, when they talk to me about catching fish, they'll say, you know, most of the Yellowstone cutthroat trout I catch are up higher around Rock Creek and Corwin Springs, and there's a reason for that, because that's where a lot of our projects are, and it's also where the water's cooler. This project here, Rock Creek had been blocked by the passage for Yellowstone cutthroat trout had been blocked for about 100 years because of an old railroad culvert that was failing. We would joke that it would take a Michael Phelps fish to swim up into it because the speed through that culvert and the length of it was just a barrier to fish. So, most fish anyway. So in 2010, got the money together and we took out the culvert, and in its place, in its footprint, this is its footprint of the old culvert, we built this series of step pools that provide fish a way to get up. They can swim up a brief, short burst through the fast water and then find a refuge of still water to take a breath, rest, and then continue their way up there. And immediately the next year after we built it, we were detecting fish at this bridge here that were able to find it the next year. And so they were getting up there after 100 years of being excluded by this culvert, and have been reproducing ever since, and the run's been increasing. I fry trapped it 2 years ago, and it's just full of Yellowstone cutthroat trout fry.
These Yellowstone cutthroat trout that we're talking about are a little different because they're living in the river. They're different than what most of us think of when we think of cutthroat trout.
Correct. It's very rare to have a river-dwelling population of cutthroat trout, especially on the eastern side of the divide. And you know, for most subspecies, in fact, that's the case. Our cutthroat are simply not compatible when living alongside rainbow trout because they hybridize, and brook trout in headwaters because they are outcompeted by the brook trout. And so to have a river-dwelling population is rare. And the mechanism that keeps the rainbow trout, which are obviously very abundant in the Yellowstone, it's a very important recreational fishery. The mechanism is that they're simply spawning at different times. The rainbow trout are spawning as the spring runoff is climbing, and then there's an area at the peak where they're overlapping, but the cutthroat mostly spawn as the spring runoff is declining, which is now. So even though we can't see them in there, the cutthroat are likely moving up here right now to spawn.
The thing that's required for this to happen, you've shown us projects on Cedar Creek, we've looked at Tom Minor Basin, we're here on Rock Creek, is water, for one thing, and to make that happen, you've had to go into some partnerships with some folks to make that work. Exactly.
None of our projects for our fluvia or our river-dwelling cutthroat trout would be possible if we did not have partnerships with private landowners. I can't stress that enough. These are, in this case, the landowners contacted us wanting something to be done. And so we have these private state partnerships that are utterly essential. 50% of our cutthroat trout are on private lands. So we cannot conserve them unless we have partnerships. And this is an example of a very successful one because we've restored a run of cutthroat trout. And unlike the rest of the river, cutthroat trout are really holding their own in this upper reach of the river, and in fact in some years are more abundant than rainbow trout and brown trout. So it's really a huge conservation success.
The thing that I've impressed with is some of the work that you've done. For example, down on Cedar Creek here, it passes underneath a highway, and there's multiple different ways to get the highway to go across that water. But the way that came about because of Montana Department of Transportation and your efforts, very suitable to Yellowstone cutthroat trout. Correct.
Yes, they can get through it, and an unexpected benefit was that culvert actually provides the spawning gravel that they need. Many of these streams are gravel limited, and the cutthroat trout find little tiny patches. They don't read the literature that I do on what's good spawning habitat and manage to find little like tea saucer sized patches of gravel to spawn in. So you'll see an 18-inch female cutthroat trout digging a red in a patch the size of a tea saucer and able to produce tens of thousands of fry in these streams that really don't meet the textbook definition of what is a good spawning stream for a trout.
You obviously love your work, Carol.
Oh my goodness, yes. I've got the best job in the world.
That's phenomenal. Carol Endicott joining us this morning. We're along one of the streams that help the unusual river-dwelling Yellowstone cutthroat trout. Carol, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for